In this video, I'll be introducing you to blueprints, showing you how to use them, when to use them, and how to communicate between them. By the end of the video, you can expect to have 3 doors which all open in different ways using different methods. If you're new to my channel and you're just dropping in on this video, I'm a game developer currently putting out Unreal Engine 4 and Blender content to help my viewers. If you have any tutorial requests, or you see anything on this list of topics that I'm covering that you're interested in, it would be so awesome if you dropped a sub. It really supports me putting out content. If you're just here for some quick knowledge on what I'm covering today, that's also cool. Regardless, I hope you enjoy the video. Good morning everyone, we're on episode 6 today. Well done for getting it this far, because now we're actually going to add some interactive elements to our game and make it more exciting. Also, check the description because I'm in the process of making a Discord. It'd be great to see your guys' progress. We can have a little community and help each other. That'd be really cool. So let's jump into this video on blueprints. So, what is a blueprint? A blueprint is basically an object or multiple objects which we can apply code to make it do things. There's 2 reasons you'd want to make a blueprint. The first one, if you just wanted to group some actors together. So for our torch, we've got the light, we've got the particle system and the mesh. We can actually group those together in a blueprint and just drag them and drop them in the level, easy. The second reason is if you wanted to make those components interactable. But first we're going to do the torch and then we're going to make an interactable door. So the first thing I want you to do is right click, create a new folder and call this blueprints. Double click to open it up, then we're going to right click again and create a blueprint class. We now have the option to select what type of blueprint we want. Don't be intimidated by this, you only really need to know 2 of these and just recognize the rest of them exist. The first one is actor. This is the simplest form of blueprint. It's used for when you want to make an object in your level interactable, such as a door, a light switch, a handle, you get the idea. The second one you need to think about is the character blueprint. This is exactly the same as the actor, but the blueprint has more movement controls and it already has a few character features built into the blueprint. But we're going to be focusing on doors and torches, so we're going to begin with an actor. So just call this torch BP. Double click to open this up, and you'll either get a page like this or it will open. If you get a page like this, just click open full blueprint editor. So if you're on the event graph, just click at the top over here to go into the viewport. Now let me explain what's going on. This is the viewport, this is what your blueprint looks like. In the top left here we can add different components to the blueprint. In the bottom left here we have more features of the blueprint, but these are more back-end things, like variables or functions if you know what they are, but don't worry about that too much, I'll explain that in a minute. And on the right here we have the details section, our favorite section where you can edit components, settings and details. And as always we have the toolbar at the top. You don't really need to know much about any of these, just remember class settings and class default, that's extra settings of the blueprint, and compile, this is pressed after you've made changes on the blueprint, which just refreshes it and applies those changes. And you may have noticed we have the event graph at the top here. This area is basically where you can write the code for the blueprints and you can make the blueprints do things, but we'll talk about that later once we've got some components on the go. So the first thing we're going to do is go up to the top here, click add component, then type in static mesh. A static mesh is all the meshes we've imported so far. It's basically a mesh without any bones or anything, just the mesh as it is. So once we click on the mesh, you will notice all these details appear. So what we're going to do is go under static mesh and then find our torch mesh and bring that in. So give the torch a color, preferably the same color you used for the torches in your world so far. Then we're going to go back up to the top and type in particle system. Now, you guessed it, we're going to add our particle system. I think it's called torch light, there we go. Then just drag it into a position which you think looks good. Maybe rotate it a bit. Now, back up to the top again, we're going to add a point light. So put this light into position over the torch, and then what we can actually do is go back to our level, click on one of the lights, right click the light color, click copy, back onto our torch, and then we can paste that light color in here. So it is exactly the same light color. We can do the same for the scaling of the torch. So now if we go out and drag this torch into the level, you will see that we have made a torch with all 3 components attached as one blueprint. This saves loads of time. Instead of having to make multiple torches like this, we've got the whole thing together as one unit where we can just copy it together like that. And one of the great things about blueprints is that you can actually attach things together in a hierarchy. So you may have noticed that some of your components are slotted under other components. This is a hierarchy system. So when any object is slotted under another object, it's attached to it, and it will copy all the transforms made by the object that's above it. So as you can see, our particle system is attached to our mesh, so anything we do to this mesh now, the particle system will do. This includes any movements, any rotations, or any scales will all be copied by the particle system because it is attached underneath it. And in every blueprint, we have a root. This is basically the king of the hierarchy, which every single object is attached to. So to attach an object to another object, if you just click and drag it onto another object, it will attach. Then to detach it, you just click and drag on it again, and it will detach. So the first thing I want you to do is just to detach all your objects. If you did exactly like me, you will notice that your particle system has been scaled down to 0.54. And that is because we scaled down our static mesh, and when we scaled down our mesh, our particle system was attached to it. So it scaled down the particle system. Turn everything back to normal, so turn this to a scale of 1, and there we go, we are back to normal. So now you understand the hierarchy system, let me just explain what a scene component is. This will be automatically created when you make a blueprint, and what it is just a reference to a location. So just picture it as an invisible ball which is just referencing a location in space. One thing that you may have picked up on is that the lights that we put into our level in the last video have an intensity of 3.5, but then if we go onto our torch blueprint, the light has an intensity of 5000. Don't think too much into this, just know that blueprint lights need a higher intensity to reach the same light value as the ones that we throw in the world. A good rule of thumb is to times whatever your world light value is by 1000. So if we go into our point light here, times 3.5 times 1000, 3500. So we've made our torch. I know this was a bit boring, but just had to explain the essentials to you guys. So what I want you to do now is go around, delete all your old torches and replace them with your new blueprint torch. I'll see you guys when that's all done. So the absolute great thing about doing this now is that if we go into our blueprint and we're not happy with something, so say this mesh is a little bit too dark, if we just change the mesh from black to, I don't know, cube material or whatever, every single mesh will be changed. Same with intensity and the rest of it. So now we're going to make our doors. So go onto blueprints, right click again, go onto blueprint class, actor, and call this moving door up. Double click to open it. Now go over to your event graph. Like I said earlier, this is where you make a blueprint interactable, and it's all done through these things. These are called nodes, and they're basically just a line of code in a little block. Unreal Engine has very kindly taken some code and turned it into a block where we can just connect these blocks to different blocks which also have lines of code in to build our program. This is called blueprinting. So there are actually thousands of these little nodes that you need to learn. But just like materials, you can't learn them all in one go. You need to learn them over time. And the easiest way, coming from experience, is basically just to keep copying people until you can remember what things do and you can implement them in your own way. So to create a node, you can right click and then type in what node you want, or you can just click on these drop downs and bring them in like that. There's also hotkeys, just like materials, where you hold down the hotkey and click to bring something in quick. But don't worry about that too much. Let's begin with events. So events is how you actually begin your code. So event begin play, this will run one time when you play your game. Event of actor begin overlap is when your actor overlaps another actor, then this will fire off. And event tick will fire rapidly. Every point of a second, this will be firing off. So to demonstrate this, we will use a print string. If you've coded in the past, you will know what a print string is. It prints a word to your program. So we're going to start by typing print, and then under string, we're going to click the print string or just hit on the enter key. So this will print the word hello when it is fired. Attach the event begin play to the print string, and we're going to type in event begin play. We're then going to copy this. You can either press Ctrl C, Ctrl V, or just click on it and then press Ctrl W to copy it directly. And then we're going to type in event tick. Don't connect your event tick to your print tick just yet, but go onto your map, drag in the moving door up anywhere you like, and then press play, and you will notice that the event begin play shows up. Now we're going to go back onto the door and plug in the event tick, and you will see that it is now firing off every point of a second. So the print string node is really good for debugging your program. Say you're trying to figure out why this door isn't opening. If you attach a print string to it, you can actually see if the code is firing up to that point. So that's what print string does. Enough of the boring stuff, let's make this door. So go into your viewport, add a static mesh, and then just make a chamfer cube. Scale this so it looks a bit more like a door. So what we want to do is actually move this door upwards, right, over time when we're at a specific point. So first we need an event. We need an event to choose when we want this door to move. We could use event begin play, so when the program's loaded, the door moves up. But I think we want the door to move up when we're stood directly in front of it. So to do that, we can actually bring in a box collision. So what this box collision does will actually allow us to trigger an overlap event. So when the character is overlapping the collision box, we can fire off an event to move the door upwards. So the first thing we're going to do is move the box into a position where we can actually stand on it as the player. So by default, the box collision will actually be hidden in the game, but when you want to see it and debug it, it's good to turn hidden off. So we're going to uncheck that now. So when we have this in the level, we will actually be able to see when we're walking into the square. So now let's briefly talk about the details panel. So the details panel, just like everything you've seen so far, the settings are all very similar, but the blueprinting settings are a tiny bit different here at the bottom. So at the bottom, depending on what component you're clicking on, you can actually see what events you can trigger off of this. So we want an event where when we walk into this box, it fires off an event and moves the door open. So if you look down here, event begin overlap, and then you can see we've got the name of our collision box there. Okay, so we want to change the location of the door. So if you click on the mesh and then hold Control and drag it in, we actually get a reference to the mesh. Now we want to change the location of the door. So there's two ways of doing this. We can either set the world location or set the relative location. So if you go back to your world, look at your map, and then click on your mesh, this is its world location, its world space location. But then if you go back onto the blueprint and then you click on the mesh, you'll notice that it has a different location. This is its relative location, its location in the blueprint. So there's just two different locations. You need to pick if you'd rather do it in the blueprint or in the world. It doesn't really matter too much, but I find it's easier to do it in the relative because the numbers are usually smaller. So back in the event graph, we're going to delete set world location and then move these up next to our box overlap. So now when someone overlaps the box, it will set the location of the door. So don't worry about these two settings down here, just worry about this one. So this is the location that the door will be sent to. So if we go back onto our viewport, I find in terms of doors, an easy way to find out what location the new location should be is by simply duplicating the door and then bringing it up to a point where you'd want the new spot to be. So now this has a new location and it's 254. So we can either copy this and put that in here, or we can drag in our new reference location and then say get relative location and plug that in. Both work equally well. So all this is doing is basically it's getting its location in this node and then it's putting it in there. But just remember, if you're doing it this way, on your reference you need to go under collision, turn off collision, and then type in hidden in game to make sure it's hidden in game so no one sees this. So if we play this now, our event tick's still running, and as soon as we go through here, our door gets teleported up to that location, which is great for now. We want it to move up there, but we want it to move over time. So the first thing we're going to do is actually move this relative location out, delete this by holding Alt then clicking, and then dragging off this and typing lerp. This basically means I want you to move from this value to this value, and then the alpha is the over time part. So we still want it to go to the same spot, so we plug that in, and now we just need the start location of the door. So if we go here, the door's at 0, 0, 0, and we're at 0, 0, 0, so that's good. So we've got the locations, now we just need to deal with the alpha. So you can think of the alpha as a percentage. If it's 100%, the door will be at the new location. If it's 0%, it will be at the start location. But instead of 100 and 0, it's actually 0 and 1. So if we put a 1 here, it will do exactly as what we had before. The door will instantly be teleported to the new location. If we put a 0.5 here, the door will be halfway between the locations, and if we put a 0, it won't move at all. It will stay at this location because it's 0% on the progress. So what we need to do is change this alpha over time from 0 to 1, and to do that we use a timeline. So move these nodes out of the way quickly, and then we're going to right click and type in timeline, add timeline. Call this whatever you want, you can just call it timeline 0, and then double click to open it up. These are the different tracks up here, and this is the length, and these are just a few settings. The only one I want you to worry about for now is the float track. This is basically a number, which the alpha is. So we're going to press shift and click and put this at 0 on the time and 0 on the value. This is our start position. Now we're going to shift and click again and put this to 3 seconds on the time and then 1 at the value. So now this is going from alpha 0 to alpha 1, 100% over the course of 3 seconds. Now just go on your length and change the length to 3, compile, and then go back onto the event graph. So now you'll see this is the new track we made just now. If we go back onto the timeline, you'll see this is called new track. You can right click it and call this alpha. Here it is, just to show you this is the new track we made. So now we're basically done with it. Just plug this into play from start because we want it to play from the start. We want to plug the alpha into here. So now the alpha is going from 0 to 100% over the course of 3 seconds, and we want it to update the location. So now if we compile and play, you should see that your door will move up over the course of 3 seconds. Okay, now guys, over to you. Play around with it and replace this door with our new moving door. You can change the speed it moves at, the scaling of the door, and the location you have to be in for it to actually start moving. Play around with it how you want, and I'll see you after the new door is in position. Okay, next, let's move on to the next door. So instead of creating an absolutely new blueprint, what we can actually do is right click this and duplicate it. This time call it moving door split, because this time we're going to get the doors to open like so. So double click to open it up, and then all we're going to do so far is change this around so it's 2 doors instead of 1. So just move that to the left, duplicate it, call this right side door, and then call the original left side door. Then just scale them up a little bit, try and get it look good. You can delete the reference because we're not moving it upwards. You can delete the decal because you don't really need to worry about that right now, and just get your 2 doors looking like this. So this time we're not changing the location, we're changing the rotation. So instead of this, we can actually delete the set relative location and type in set relative rotation. And just like the location, we want it to rotate over time. We don't want it to just go straight away. So we're going to lerp this by typing lerp on the rotator. So exactly the same as the vector for location, we're actually now going to be changing the rotation. So we'll still use the same alpha, but now we need to change these 2 rotation values. So we want the left door to rotate outwards. So the start rotation is 0, 0, 0, and then we want it to rotate like so. But you'll notice that it's rotating from its center point. it's not rotating from the side. And that is to do with the origin point. When this mesh was created, the center of the origin was in the middle, so all the rotations will happen around this point. But that's what's great about the blueprint hierarchy system. By adding in another component, we can then attach the door to it and then rotate the component instead of the door. So what we're going to do is add another scene component. Like I said, this is basically just a reference to a location, right? So we want to move this over to where we want to rotate the door, somewhere on the left side. Then we want to attach the door to it. So now if we rotate this, it's going to rotate around this point, and as the door's attached to it, regardless of its origin, it's going to rotate around the scene's point. So if we rotate now, you can see it rotates quite kind of nicely. We're actually going to move it in a tiny bit just so the wall doesn't get doesn't move into the wall. So you actually have to detach the door and then move the scene in and then reattach the door like so. And now looking a bit better. So do the same for the right and I'll see you guys afterwards. Okay, now you should have two scenes, one on either side for each door, which will do the rotation. Just call them scene left for the left, scene right. Doesn't really matter, just recognize which one's left and right. So we go back into the event graph. We no longer want to change the rotation of the door because we're changing the rotation of the scene which the door is attached to. So put that in, then go back onto your viewport, see what rotation the new rotation is going to be. So we're going from 0 to -90. When you paste it in, it will actually post the degree sign, so you need to actually delete that before it to get it to paste. Then just plug in the update, and now we can test this out. So now only the left side should rotate, and there we go. So now we're going to do the same for the right side. This is a task for you guys. Try and figure out the right side on your own. You basically just have to copy what I've done on the left side, but change the values a little bit. So pause the video now. Alright, hopefully you've got it all done. Let me show you what you had to do. So, just like the left side, we are setting the relative rotation, but we're doing it for the right side. We are lerping it still, we're plugging the alpha in still, but we're changing from -90 to 90. So now you will see that both the doors open correctly, which is really cool. One thing you'll notice though, is that when you go back in to the door, they will reopen. Same goes for this door. If you re-go in it, it will reopen. So let me show you how you can deal with this issue. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back onto the door moving up, and then you're actually going to introduce a do once node. Kind of like what it says in the node, it does something once and then it won't do it again unless you tell it to do it again. So if you actually drag off this box, then type in do once, it will automatically slot it in there for you. So now it will do this once, it will open, and then you'll have to reset it if you want it to do it again. Now we're going to go into the doors which are splitting open, and I'm going to introduce you to variables. So if you look in the bottom left here, you can see the new components that we've made have been added to this section down here. These can be used to drag and drop, but don't do that. And then the variables are also down here. So if we click new variable, we then get a new variable pop up, and all the details appear in the top right. So we'll just call this one doors open ? So what actually is a variable? A variable is just something which is holding a value. So if you go under variable type, we can have a Boolean variable, which is either a true or false value. We can have an integer number, so the variable could be a number like 10 or something. We can have a float, which is just a number with a decimal. String, like a word. You get the idea. So a variable is just something that's holding a value. So at the start of this, we're going to pull away our begin overlap, control click our variable to drag it in, and we're going to bring in a branch node. You can either press B and click, or you can right click and type in branch. A branch node is, for any of you coders out there, an if statement. So if this value is true, then it will do this. If this value is false, it will go down this path. So we're going to plug our variable doors open into this, And if you click on doors open, click compile, we can set the value here. So at the moment it's false. So if we plug this in, then pull the false into here, we can see when we overlap, is our doors open false? Doors open is false, so we're going to do this. So what we're going to do now is actually set the value to true as soon as we send off the message to open the doors. So instead of control and dragging this in, we're going to alt and drag it in, and here we can set the value. So we're going to set it to true, and then we're going to open our doors. So if we go through this again, when we open up the box, if the doors aren't open, we're going to set the doors to open and then open the doors. So then if we try and run this again, on overlap, are the doors open? They are now open, so we're not going to do anything. And there we go. So now if we try both doors, we should see this one only does once, and this one, we set the variable to true, so nothing is happening now. And now we're doing the final door. It's going to be exactly the same as this split door, but we're actually going to tell it to open with a button instead of an overlap, and that will teach you a bit more about how you can communicate between blueprints. So the first thing we're going to do is go back onto the map, duplicate the split, and this time call it split button. So now move over to your final door, put in the split button, and then double click to open it up. Close down the other doors just so we don't get confused. Okay, so now we still want it to do all of this, but we don't want it to open when we overlap the box. So we can delete this, and we can actually delete the box completely. So now we're going to create a custom event, and a custom event is a way of firing something from somewhere else. I know that doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense, but just bear with me. So type in custom event and call this open doors. So this is an event just like anything else, which when fired will fire off this line of code. So after you've actually made a custom event, you will notice if you type in open doors, you can actually call this event. So just like anything else, if you attach it to an event begin play, when it plays, it will then call this open doors. So basically when you play the level, the doors will open, but we don't want to call it as soon as we play. We want to call it when we press a button, which means we can compile and get off that. Then we're going to right click, create a new blueprint, actor, and call this button. So we're going to add a static mesh. Then we're going to put in a chamfer. Scale this down so it looks a bit more like a button. And then we're going to add component, add a box collision, and then just cover that collision all over the button. Then we're going to go onto the event graph, click on the box, event begin overlap, and what you'd think you'd do is just drag off this and type in open doors, but you'll notice there is no option to open doors. But when we go back onto the other blueprint, there is an option to open doors, and that's because these are separate blueprints. You can't do something in one blueprint and tell another blueprint to do something without changing some settings around. So there are two fairly simple ways of communicating between blueprints. The first one is get actors of class. So bring that in, select the moving door split button, drag off this and type in get, and then drag off this and type open doors. So what this is basically doing, this is getting the blueprint. So we've gotten the blueprint moving doors split button. As you can have multiple copies of the same blueprint, this node tells the program which copy you want to work with. Normally when you're counting something, 1 is the first number. In Unreal Engine, 0 is the first number. So when you have the number 0 here, that actually means the very first actor. When you have the number 1 here, you actually mean the second actor. It goes up like that, etc. So just try and get that around your head. Okay, so using this method, we can pick a blueprint, we can choose which number blueprint we want, Do we want to communicate with the first one in the level? Do we want to communicate with the second one in the level? And then we can pull off and pull the function that we made. But what if we wanted to open the doors of every door, not just the first one? What we can actually use is a for loop. So drag off the out actors, type in for each loop, and this will basically just loop through every number blueprint and open the doors of all of them. So if we do it like this for now, plug this into here, compile. This is actually the wrong door. We want the moving door split button. So just make 3 of these, then drag in your button. Now, when we stand on this button, all 3 doors will open. So if we go back to here and use the get method that we spoke about before, if we just do the 0, we will open the first one in the level. If on the get we put a 1, we would have opened the second one we put in the level, which was this one, and if we put a 2, we would have opened the third one we created in the level, which was this one. So that is one way of communicating with blueprints. Moving on to the second way of communicating with blueprints. This way we actually use a variable. So if we click on here, new variable, call this door moving split, and then under variable type in moving door split button, or type in whatever you called your blueprint, then click object reference and tick instance editable. I'll explain what instance editable means in a minute, but for now, drag in your new variable with control and click, and then pull off here and type open doors. Then take our box that we used to the overlap on the button and plug that into here. So the way this works is that we've basically got a variable which is referencing the blueprint. So now that we've got a reference, we can just open the doors directly. But at the moment, we've just got a reference to the general blueprint like this. We don't know which one we want to actually open. So if you compile and then go back onto your Mac, you will notice that the variable has now popped up here. If you have instance editable, it will mean that your variable will pop up on your details panel of your blueprint. So I unchecked it, but now I'm going to check it again, and now you will see it appears. So now we can just use this eyedropper to pick any one in the level that we've got, which is the same blueprint. Click it. Now we've got the reference and we know which one we're using. We can then do it like so. In general, you should use the variable communication method when you want to interact with a single blueprint that you can select in your level using the eyedropper. You should use the getActorsOfClass method when you want to communicate with multiple blueprints at the same time, or when the blueprint you want to communicate with hasn't actually been spawned yet, so you can't select it via the eyedropper. Well guys, that's it for today. Holy did a lot of work today. We actually covered so many things that you need to know, like custom events, communicating. It's all good stuff. So well done, we've progressed rapidly today. Let me know if there's anything I can improve for next week, and make sure you stay tuned for next time, because we're going to be doing more interesting blueprints like bomb explosions, things like that. I have to check my blueprint list and see which is the most exciting that I can pass on to you guys. So thank you for watching as always, and I'll see you guys next time.